Did you know that Zorro is called the clever fox because Zorro is the Spanish for fox? So that would make him Fox, the clever fox. Well, that's just stupid. Since we have covered 2 Zorro movies already, I thought it would be a nice change of pace to talk about the characters' incarnations in the small screen. We all know about the 1957 television series, but not a lot of people know that Zorro had 4 different adaptations in cartoon form. Making Zorro into an animated show opens a few interesting possibilities, as you can create new environments that were previously impossible with only actors and sets. Every animated Zorro is different on their own way, and I intend to talk about all of them. So let's begin with the new adventures of Zorro.
For I am Zorro!
The New Adventures of Zorro was created by Filmation Studios. This cartoon was part of the Tarzan Lone Ranger Adventure Hour, which showed episodes from the company's animated shows of those characters respectively. Can you imagine a team up with those 3 guys? Add the Defenders of the Earth to that mix and it would be freaking amazing! The show stars Don Diego de la Vega in his adventures as Zorro, while he fights Captain Ramon and the stereotypically evil Spanish government.
Thank you, senores. I've always wanted to go treasure hunting.
Interestingly, this is the first cartoon Filmation had to outsource to a studio called Tokyo Movie Shinsha in Japan, because they were too busy with other productions. This is relevant because it was one of the first instances where something like this was done, and it later became a common practice for budget and timing reasons. For example, this is the same studio that was commissioned to animate the first season of the DuckTales cartoon. Despite this, the animation is clunky and there are a few hiccups here and there. That is, except during the titular characters' sword fights. These look more realistic because they were animated by rotoscoping a member of the staff who was on the Olympic fencing team, which in turn made those scenes repetitive after a while. Okay, so maybe it wasn't the best animation. Like many Filmation characters before it, the New Adventures of Zorro recycles animation from time to time. But honestly, they do it less than previous shows, which believe me, helps a lot with the pacing. However, something I'll never understand about those cartoons is the endless transitions. It's not like it's not done these days, but back then it was every 10 seconds or so.
Do something! There's not a ship in sight, Captain. Only a few clouds on the horizon.
Good. Then it's time to return to Anacapa Reef.
I think I want to make me a sandwich. Damn it, I'm out of ham! Yes, can you bring me 5 tacos, please? What? This shit takes time, you know? The story is set before the Mexican Independence War, while California was still controlled by Spain, much like the rest of the country. Most of the stories go like you would expect from a Zorro adaptation, yet Filmation still took a few liberties with the source material. The first biggest change is Diego's servant. Usually Bernardo, a deaf man, was replaced with a young boy named Miguel. He dons a similar outfit to Zorro's and fights as his sidekick, Amigo. Yes, he's Zorro's amigo, but what is his name?
It's worth a try, amigo. You were right, amigo. Careful, amigo. Amigo, start digging.
fucking kidding me? Why would you call yourself amigo? You live in California. Chances are almost everyone there speaks Spanish. What if you befriend somebody you just saved? Should they thank you by saying, "Gracias, amigo"? Amigo? Why? And what is up with that bizarre bow tie? You know, bow ties used to be cool, until Amigo ruined them. And what made him think red and yellow was a good combination for a costume? Furthermore, his costume, especially the colors, remind me of somebody else. I know I have seen it before, but I just can't put my finger on it.
I want a car. Chicks dig the car.
This is why Puma Man works alone. So yeah, Amigo was created to be an exact clone of Robin. He even makes small comments to Zorro here and there like Robin does on Filmation's Batman. The new Adventures of Batman. Oh, the cruel irony! Besides that obvious change, a new antagonist was added to Zorro's stories. A pirate named Lucia, with a crew and a ship and everything.
You are hard indeed. Being a pirate is a recipe. Do what you want, 'cause a pirate is free. You are a pirate.
Lucia is actually an awesome addition to the cast. In fact, I hope they put her in whatever future movie or show they make. Rather than a standard bad guy, she's like an anti-hero, stealing from the Spanish government, which by the way was a real thing pirates did back in those times, but only for her own benefit. Despite this, Zorro and Lucia often find themselves on the same side. He is a bandit after all, but, and this is important, there is no forced romance between them. Dude, that's impressive!
Save your ship, Lucia, and I will fight by your side.
What? Why would you?
For my freedom, and because it is the only way we're going to get away from here.
Agreed. To the longboat! Defend yourselves!
Speaking of which, this is also one of the first American cartoons to use a Hispanic voice cast for most of the characters. Damn! It's too bad this is kind of a rehash of Batman and Robin's adventures, but at least some of the stories are different. Another cool thing about this show were the lessons at the end of each episode. After an episode finished, El Zorro appeared once again to teach the audience the meaning of a Spanish word, and also to talk about the geography of California.
As you can see, on my left is the harbor of San Pedro, and on my right, the beautiful bay of Santa Monica. One is named after a man, Pedro or Peter, and the other a woman, San, when the saint is a man, Santa, when it is a woman. Hasta la vista, amigos!
So, despite the limited animation, this show is actually really damn good. And if you are interested on Zorro, I definitely recommend watching it. In fact, it's so good that the next American adaptation could only be disappointing.
Me temo que te quedaste expuesto.
We didn't get a new Zorro cartoon until 1996, when Japan of all places made their own version of the character. But I'm going to save that one for later, since it's a completely retooled story and it needs a full episode to cover it. Instead, let's jump to 1 year later for the next American cartoon of Zorro. The New Adventures of Zorro. Wait, what? Okay, so the title on the intro is actually just Zorro. But if you look it up online, it turns out they both have the same name. So does that mean this is a reboot of that cartoon? I highly doubt it. Lucia and Amigo are absent from the cast, and while this show also takes a lot of liberties from Zorro, it's nothing like the adventures presented on the Filmation cartoon. In this retelling of the swashbuckler story, Diego de la Vega comes across more enemies than he ever had before. Not only is he facing the tyranny of the Spanish government, he also interacts occasionally with mythical creatures, ancient civilizations, and even this steampunk fellow. Whatever the hell he is. Hey, I know that guy from somewhere.
Name Stelgato. Ah, Stelgato. Spectral Exterminator.
Well, that doesn't explain anything. Speaking of steampunk, we may have lost the flamboyance of Amigo's costume, but in his place, Bernard returns to be Zorro's helpful servant. Except here, he also makes him gadgets. You know, like Batman's gadgets. Dude even has a grappling hook. I'm starting to see a pattern here. You got totally not Robin on the 80s cartoon, and in the 90s cartoon, Zorro uses gadgets and has a bigger rogues gallery. So, 1997 Zorro is trying to be Batman, the animated series. In the 80s version, the addition of a sidekick doesn't affect the story much other than having someone to help Zorro when he's in trouble. But the changes in the 90s version are more noticeable and sadly hurt the show a bit, making it a lot less original. Also, because of the bigger bad guy count, the show turns into a villain of the week cliché and loses a lot of possible conflict. Zorro always has the right gadget in the end to solve everything, much like the Power Rangers conveniently getting a new weapon when a monster is too strong. And there's the problem of this show trying to be Batman. That's not to say everything about this cartoon is bad. For starters, the opening is pretty rad.
Out in old California, so the story is told. Diego finds his destiny, shining brighter than gold. The whisper of his name stirs hope in the hearts of the poor. Zorro will fight for them all through the night for them. Zorro will always endure.
Also, the animation is decent and the fantasy element they are trying to convey makes for a few interesting stories. For example, there is an episode in which Zorro and the Spanish soldiers discover a hidden civilization that hadn't been conquered by the Spaniards yet. Insert Road to El Dorado reference here. And one of the Indians there tells them the legends about the feathered serpent god, who is an actual god from pre-Hispanic cultures. And in a really cool twist, the monster turns out to be an elaborate set of traps. And then there's an episode where a boy turns into a giant squirrel. With horns! Well, at least they say it's a squirrel. It is sad that the character who inspired most of Batman's current themes has now been relegated to trying to copy him. Maybe it's because of the setting. The more current you try to make Zorro, the more he ends up being too similar to Batman. It's like a vicious cycle that will sadly never end. Maybe Zorro isn't as timeless as many of us like to think. Overall, I would recommend watching the Filmation Zorro cartoon over the Warner Bros. Cartoon any day. Sure, it's extremely dated, but it's an interesting take on the character. And besides, you may learn some things you didn't know before about California just by watching a silly cartoon. I think that's more than enough reason to watch. You can catch every episode of the show on Hulu right now. Next time, we'll try to figure out what is up with Japan always making their superheroes white and blonde. Until then, I'm the Film Renegado. Thanks a lot for watching and remember, you should know your neighbors better. Hasta la próxima!